Make sure to subscribe and turn on the notifications so you can be alerted when new content is released.
To get what we want.
Enjoy the video.
For something greater to happen.
Absolutely.
Well, that's such a paradox. And the moment you step in, it honors free will. So then the person who's the new age person who's saying, well, I'm just going to wait for my Maserati to come to me. This is not how that works. Once you move into a new state of being and you're creating wealth, in other words, only gold creates gold. Lead doesn't create gold. And our job is to take those base emotions of anger and resentment and fear and anxiety, those base emotions, and transmute them into gold. Because right on the other side of our pain is freedom. Right on the other side of our lack is wealth or abundance. Right on the other side of our fear is courage. It's the same energy. It's just trapped in the body. And when we transmute that energy into something else, right? Now we have available energy to begin to design a destiny with. So then a person who moves into that elegant state of being where they're expanded and they're enriched and they're in love with life, then they can't go back to the old self, you know, because that is their new state of being. So then if you practice that every day, sooner or later it's going to begin to become familiar to you.
And you may feel it, you may see things, you may hear from it. I mean, there are means of communications that can be set up at going through that process.
So then if you're creating wealth,
yes,
and you're in the state of being of abundant, you better not be thinking lacking thoughts, because an abundant person would never do that. You can't demonstrate that you're not making choices because you believe that there's not enough, lack of time, lack of energy, lack of money. A wealthy person would never, abundant person would never think of it. You can't feel unworthy and lacking if you're going to be a wealthy person. So by very logic and reason, you got to lay that down and move into this state of being. Now, once you're in that state of being, you can't sit on the couch and wait for the phone call. Once you're in that state of being, you got to start making choices into the unknown from that state of being. You got to trust in the unknown. The moment you don't make the choice, you just doubted your creation. You return back to the known. And so people then, when you're in that state of being, the miraculous happens when you say, okay, I'm going to go for it. But you're not going to go for it as your limited emotional self. You're going to go for it as your unlimited self, and you begin to make those choices, and you step out into the unknown. That's when the miraculous happens, and you say, oh my God, I'm so glad I made that choice. But then waking up in the morning then, and priming your brain and body to make that change is the key. There's 2 times the door to the subconscious mind opens up. Excuse me, when we wake up in the morning, and we go to bed at night.
Right.
Why?
In that crossover place.
Because your brain goes from deep delta brainwaves to theta brainwaves to alpha brainwaves to beta brainwaves. Why? And when you go to bed at night, it goes from beta to alpha to theta to delta. And if you can't get there, you're stuck in high beta. It's because you're driving the sports car in first gear, right? So people do whatever they can to get down there. So the brain chemistry works in accordance with this. So when you wake up in the morning and the receptors in the back of your eye pick up light, the moment that happens, your optic nerve sends a signal to the pineal gland, and the pineal gland starts making serotonin. And serotonin is the daytime neurotransmitter. In other words, serotonin gets you up and going. It gets your brain turned on. The moment it starts getting dark at night and your eye is no longer picking up visible light, the mechanism starts to change, and now because there's less light, the optic nerve sends a signal to the pineal gland. The pineal gland takes serotonin and starts carving off a couple methyl groups and turns it into melatonin. And melatonin is the nighttime neurotransmitter. So Sarah gets you up in the morning, and Mel puts you to bed at night. Now, when serotonin increases, your brainwave patterns go into beta. That's because you're going to pay attention more to the outer world. When you're in meditation and you close your eyes and you eliminate light and it's dark in the room and you play music in the background, you put earplugs in, you're getting less sensory data coming in from your environment, so the neocortex is not so preoccupied with trying to create meaning between the outer world and the inner world. You're forgetting about the outer world, and the inner world is where you're cultivating something. So then, when you close your eyes and do your meditation, then your brain waves move into melatonin. But if you're waking up in the morning and you're waking up at 5 in the morning, guess what? Your brain waves will probably be in theta or alpha. You're in your subconscious. You're past the beta thinking, right? If you go to bed at night, I have friends that are artists and playwrights and musicians. They stay up till 2 in the morning. They love that 11 o'clock till 2 in the morning. They're nighttime. They're in alpha. They got all these creative ideas. There's, me, I'm a morning person. I wake up. I'm up at 4:30 or 5 in the morning. It's my time to create. I set aside a certain amount of time. That's my time, because the rest of the day I'm serving. So I like to get myself right in the morning, right? So doing that then begins to alter brainwave patterns. Now, if you move from beta to alpha, there'll come an amazing moment where if you do this right, you'll slip into theta. Now, theta is when your body is asleep, but your mind is awake.
Yes.
So think about this. If your body's asleep and you've conditioned it to be the mind through addictions or habits, the moment the body's asleep, it's no longer the mind. So there's no longer any resistance. And that's where instantaneous change takes place. If you go too far, you slip into delta, and that's called deep sleep and restorative sleep. And people say to me, well, I really can't meditate. And I say, really? Where do you meditate? Oh, in bed.
Yeah, well,
get out of bed.
Boom, a trip.
Get out of bed, because you're going to go right to delta.
Yeah.
So then, what we noticed in our research, to finish that other thought, is that there comes a moment when you're in that coherent level of alpha, that all of a sudden you slip into theta. And all of a sudden, when theta turns on, all of a sudden, you start seeing this amazing change take place. And the body becomes so relaxed, and the energy centers, the sympathetic nervous system, switches on. But instead of switching on like you're being chased by a tiger, or switching on like having an orgasm, or ejaculating, or switching on for whatever reason, it's switching on in balance with the parasympathetic nervous system.
Yes.
So the parasympathetic nervous system settles the body down, but now the sympathetic nervous system turns on, and here comes that energy, and whoosh, it travels right up the central nervous system, and when it hits the brainstem, switches on what's called the thalamic gate, the reticular activating system. All that energy now hits the train station, the docking station where all the neurons go, and boom, it hits the neocortex, and now you're producing gamma brainwave patterns, and gamma brainwaves are super conscious brainwave patterns. In other words, the inner world is the real world. The experience is so profound energetically that you never forget the moment. That's when you rewrite the program. That lady we showed having ecstasy and taking in a state of ecstasy in their meditation, she was in high gamma.
Right.
We were watching her. I was watching her go. We were going alpha, alpha, theta, theta, theta. We looked at each other and we were like, oh no, Jeffrey and I, and all of a sudden, boom, here it comes, gamma. Off. So then the moment that happens, then that's energy. Yeah. And the sympathetic nervous system now is in complete balance with the parasympathetic nervous system. The thalamic gate is open. The subconscious is out of the way. It's released. And the energy is now traveling to the thinking brain, and the person's becoming super aware. You just took the dimmer switch and went from 20 watts to 50 watts, which is normal, to 100 watts. Right. And we saw that in all the redness in the brain. Her brain was full of energy, and she was in a state of catharsis. She could control that, but why would she want to? Now she's having an orgasm in her head. Her brain is having the orgasm, and it's not chemical. It's electromagnetic. It's electromagnetic. Now, here's what happens. The moment that happens, melatonin has to change. Now it starts turning into all of these amazing neurotransmitters. Melatonin is transmuted in the alchemical factory of the pineal gland, and it makes a chemical that is one of the strongest antioxidants known to man. In other words, just a little tweak on the melatonin molecule, and now you have an anti-aging, anti-cancer, anti-heart disease, antimicrobial, anti-neurodegenerative disease chemical that's floating through your bloodstream. That's the first thing.
HGH or something? What is it?
No, it's an antioxidant. It's all those things.
Oh,
so
wow.
You just take a methyl group and twist it, and it turns out. Then if you take melatonin and you change it again, it creates a phospholuminescent chemical, the same chemical found in the electric eel. Now, what is that? The neurons are just filled with energy, and there's a glow. And the neurons now are heightened, and they're storing energy, and that's what gives those colors and patterns during the experience. And if you switch that molecule again, it turns into the chemical that you find in mammals that are hibernating. In other words, no sex drive, no appetite, the body's in stasis. You're no longer having any drives. And what a time to dream. What a time to create a future, when the body is no longer the mind. Take that chemical and tweak it again, and it's the most powerful hallucinogenic known to man. And now you're talking about the God molecule. You're talking about the inner world as the real world, and now you are walking into a dimension. And this is where you go from space-time into time-space. And that's the vision quest, or the lucid experience, or whatever mystical moment that has been talked about for antiquity. And it takes a little bit to get people to this point, but when the neurotransmitters change, the chemicals are a downward causation of a shift in consciousness. And when that happens, holy hell, because the person will never be the same. I've had experiences, I understand them, and you can't go back to business as usual after a few of those.
Okay, and you just dropped it in passing early on that you have had these experiences where you just haven't say, oh, when I'm out of my body. Okay, whoa, hold on. What were you saying? So I assume that also this is the crossover period that makes that kind of experience available to one, right?
Yeah, I think, my interest is to demystify this.
Right.
So
let's demystify it.
I mean, information, you teach people information, you teach them how to do it, and then it creates transformation. If we can measure transformation, that's more information to teach transformation better, and we can close the gap. So, in one of our advanced workshops, we actually did extensive meditation. One of the things I've realized in my own personal experience is that you have to go past the point where you want to lay down in your meditation. There comes a point when you want to lay down or you want to give up or stop. If you go a little bit past that point and you sit up a little bit longer, and then you lay down, and you can do it early in the morning, because the neurotransmitters are just right. They're not quite melatonin, they're not quite serotonin, they're in between. And if you can get up and do your meditation early enough and sit up for an extended period of time and then lay down, the light show is going to begin.
Yes.
And so I started having these mystical experiences a couple years ago, and I would literally, they were so unusual that I had to go back to my quantum physics books and begin to look at what exactly was going on. But I wasn't taking any drugs. My brain was the pharmacy, in a sense. And I was having these Kundalini experiences, and it was like I was getting plugged into a light socket, like someone plugged me into the electricity socket, and I could feel every single cell of my body turning on all at once, and it was like somebody took that dial and turned it up, and it was amazing. So there was a signature energetically of love that came with that.
Yes.
It was the thing that I became the most interested in, because when I started having these experiences, Regina, the first thing I realized is I got this all wrong. I really had it all wrong, because this intelligence is so incredibly loving. And it's who we are. We're just separate from it. We're particle instead of wave. And when your nervous system tunes into that and the electromagnetism comes with it, the only way you can describe it is that you are so present, so conscious, and so in love with the idea of being alive that you don't want anything else. You can't want in that moment, because if you started to want, you would lose the feeling. So you can't want. All you can do is be, right, and love. So I started having these experiences, and then I started thinking, well, maybe we should be able to teach this. So I started doing the research on the neuroendocrinology and what it took and the brain chemistry at the time. And then I had to start explaining what the heck was happening to me. So that's how